So, you want to play Abomination Vaults. Hello and welcome back to Podfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Today's video is another video player's guide, this time focusing on possibly the most famous and popular AP in all of 2nd Edition, Abomination Vaults. For those unfamiliar with my player's guides, this video will provide a brief overview on the structure and themes of the campaign, while remaining light on spoilers. I'll provide a rundown of the setting and lore leading up to the campaign, then dig into some mechanical options players can select to have a thematic connection to the story, including ancestries, classes, and religious options. With that out of the way, let's start with the campaign overview. Very minor spoiler alert for Chapter 1 of the AP, plus the broad strokes of the story. I won't spoil anything you can't infer from reading the blurb on the back of the book, or reading the player's guide. Abomination Vaults is a 3-part adventure path, taking PCs from 1st level to 11th level. It is the 4th adventure path which Paizo has produced for 2nd edition, covering books 163 through 165 in the Adventure Path product line. Since its release, the AP has been incredibly well received, and has even been re-released as a single-volume hardcover collection, which is the version I have. Abomination Vaults is commonly cited as the best entry campaign for new players, after they play the beginner box, and even takes place in the same starting town of Otari. Even if you watch this video, I recommend that you read the player's guide for Abomination Vaults, if you intend to play the campaign. It is available online for free, so check out the link in the description. Abomination Vaults is about the best example of a dungeon crawl that I have ever seen, at least for low to mid-level characters. Seriously, this entire campaign is built around the exploration of a single, incredibly detailed and fantastically rich dungeon. The titular Abomination Vaults are filled with all manner of vicious threats, interesting traps, and fascinating NPCs sure to challenge players in a wide variety of ways. The goal of the adventure is simple: the exploration and pacification of the Abomination Vaults. But the order in which players complete the various sub-goals to accomplish that mission is fantastically open-ended, encouraging players to embrace a curious mindset and explore at their own pace, within reason. Though the AP is a dungeon crawl through and through, players should be aware that combat isn't the only option they have. Stealth and diplomacy are often entirely valid paths forward, and embracing these non-violent approaches can often lead to a much easier time for PCs. At the same time, when the PCs are forced to fight, fights don't always need to be to the death. Especially on the part of the PCs, knowing when to tactically retreat is entirely acceptable in this AP, and might save your character if they accidentally wander too deep into the dungeon too quickly. You're mostly exploring this dungeon at your own pace, so be smart about it. In terms of how the adventure starts, the setup here is pretty straightforward. The PCs have all found themselves in Otari, and have all been contacted by one of the town's inhabitants, a stargazing Nephilim named Rin Sivinxi. Rin's status as a Nephilim blessed her with exceptional eyesight, and her habit of stargazing means she spends many a night in total darkness looking at the sky. During a recent stargazing session, Rin witnessed something extraordinary. The Gaunt Light, the ruined lighthouse in the swamp north of Otari, had begun to glow. Fearful of what this might mean, Rin contacted the PCs and tasked them with investigating the Gaunt Light, and the source of the strange and eerie light. And that's it. The adventure literally starts with the adventurers on the front door of the dungeon. Paizo didn't waste any time on the setup for this one. That said, if you and your tablemates feel like establishing a better connection with one another in town before storming the dungeon together, I fully recommend it. Actually, if you're new players to Pathfinder 2e, I suggest running the beginner box before Abomination Vaults, as a sort of Chapter 0, to allow your characters to meet one another and Rin, and familiarize themselves with Otari. This could also give them a chance to earn the status of local heroes, which might explain why Rin goes to them to ask for help in dealing with the Gaunt Light. The Abomination Vaults adventure path is one of those APs which is pretty much entirely fixed in one location, giving the players ample opportunity to sink their teeth into the richly detailed setting Paizo has provided. I won't spoil anything about the Abomination Vaults themselves, since exploring them is the entire point of this AP, but the town of Otari will serve as the player's home base throughout the campaign. Otari is a small but successful lumber town on the southern coast of the Isle of Kortos. Located about 65 miles west of Absalom, Otari has a surprisingly diverse population, numbering just over 1,200. The town is exceptionally prosperous and serves as one of the few places on the Starstone Isle where the Kortos Consortium does not control the lumber trade. In addition to a prime location in a sheltered bay at the outlet of the Osprey River, the town boasts a notable feature which provides it with a substantial industrial advantage: the Giant's Wheel. This sawmill is powered by a large water wheel over 30 feet in diameter. In addition to powering the mechanical components of the mill, the wheel provides power to a large conveyor system which transports processed timber down the cliffs to the shoreline for transport. This device is what allowed Otari to prosper, and was designed by Maklani Menims, granddaughter of one of the town's original founders. Otari boasts no less than 3 taverns of varying specialties, one of which, the Crook's Nook, doubles as an inn. Additionally, the fishery opens its doors at night to become an entertainment hall as well, and is fairly popular. Approaching from the sea, the Giant's Wheel and the conveyor system I mentioned earlier are the most immediately visible landmarks, but the Dawnflower Library, which sits below the cliffs on a shelf of rock just above the sea, is a close runner-up. This structure serves as a temple to all non-evil deities worshipped in Otari, but also stores a large collection of books on all manner of topics, from history to geography. Another landmark is visible to those approaching overland, the Stone Ring Pond. This small pond is encircled by a ring of standing stones, and is commonly seen as a holy site by followers of Desna, or especially Gozra. Otari commonly plays host to adventurers departing Absalom as they set out for places unknown. As such, the town is exceptionally well stocked in goods and services which adventurers can put to use. Blades for Glades, the local blacksmith, is well trained in the crafting of weapons. Crow's Casks, one of the taverns in town, produces and sells a wide variety of potions. The Dawnflower Library offers scrolls, wands, spellcasting services, and even magic weapons. And the Odd Stories Bookshop is known to translate or purchase ancient texts. Finally, Rin's Wonders offers all manner of magic items, as well as adventuring gear. Rin herself is seen as a bit of an oddity in town, but more for her eccentric and claustrophobic tendencies rather than her status as a Nephilim. For those of you familiar with First Edition, Otari has a lot of parallels to Sandpoint, the starting town for a few APs from back in the day. Sandpoint has become popular over the years in large part because players have really made it their own. On that note, if you want to really dig deep into Otari's lore and cast of NPCs, I strongly suggest picking up the Abomination Vaults Expanded product on Pathfinder Infinite. The author has done an incredible job of fleshing out the town of Otari even further, and has even added several side quests to break up the dungeon crawl, which makes up the majority of the plot. This is an especially helpful product if your table has a few new players, as it expands upon the setting of Golarion in a way that still feels authentic to the tone of Abomination Vaults, using the occasional side plot and story event to contextualize the party's quest to clear the vaults and save the town. I've dropped the link in the description if you're interested. The citizens of Otari actually know quite a bit about the town's history and its connection to the Gauntlet, and this information is readily available to anyone curious enough to ask. 500 years ago, before Otari even existed, a wicked sorceress named Belcora amassed no small amount of power in her mighty fortress in the nearby Fogfen Swamp. For reasons known only to her, she constructed the Gauntlet, a large lighthouse over her keep. Belcora's actions drew the attention of some adventurers in Absalom, and one group, called the Rose Guard, set out to deal with the sorceress. The Rose Guard invaded the Gauntlight Keep and faced Belcora, defeating her and leaving her dead in her fortress. This was no easy task, however, and one member of the Rose Guard, a rogue named Otari Ilvashti, died in the conflict. The remaining party members, an Aristilian cleric named Esefna Minims, a fighter named Vol Rajani, and a powerful wizard named Zarmavdian, decided that their days of adventuring had come to an end. They made their way to the coast south of Gauntlight Keep and established the town of Otari, naming it for their deceased friend. So well known is this tale among the citizens of Otari that the local parents have developed a nursery rhyme about it to encourage obedience on the part of their children. When the fog is creeping and the moon is low, when the town is sleeping, Gauntlight starts to glow. That's when she arises for her midnight lunch. Naughty kids are prizes for her teeth to crunch. But if you obey me and obey the rules, you're safe from Belcora. She just eats the fools. I've linked a musical version of this poem in the description, so check it out. In truth, few, if any, adults in Otari believe in any ghosts inhabiting the Gauntlight. It's commonly accepted that the ruins of the fortress are largely abandoned, and now only serve as a home for the occasional troublemakers, most recently the stone-scale kobolds, who have proven a nuisance for the town time and again throughout its history. After the peaceful deaths of the members of the Rose Guard, Otari went into decline and was eventually abandoned. It wouldn't be revived until decades later, when Maklani Menims, granddaughter of Esefna, hired adventurers to drive out the kobolds who had inhabited the town. She then constructed the Giant's Wheel, setting the town up for success in the lumber industry. That success holds true to this day, and descendants of the original Rose Guard can still be found in Otari. The town celebrates the achievements of the Rose Guard every year on Founders' Day, a local festival held on the third day of the month of Desnas. Now it's time to dig into some player-facing information you can use to build PCs with a strong thematic connection to this AP. As usual, everything I present here is just a suggestion based on my readings of the adventure path. You can absolutely deviate from my advice in this video and still have a great time with the Abomination Vaults. Otari is an exceptionally diverse place, despite its status as a small logging community. While humans are the most numerous occupants of the settlement, members of all the core ancestries presented in Player Core 1 have at least some representation in the town, with the exception of the Orc and the Leshy. Even Ayuvaran and Dromar are known in Otari, and Nephilim are not seen as an oddity. If you feel like playing something outside of these ancestries, however, feel free to do so without too much concern. Otari's proximity to Absalom means the citizens have had decades of exposure to all manner of ancestries, heritages, and ethnicities as travelers pass through town on their way to or from the city at the center of the world. Outsiders might be teased if they are city folk or seem too busy for the normally low-key life in Otari, but will rarely ever be greeted with prejudice or outright hostility purely on the basis of their ancestry. For that reason, most, if not all, ancestries can work in this campaign, though I would caution players against playing characters who live an aquatic lifestyle, like merfolk or Azarketi, since they will have few opportunities to put their aquatic skills to use. All that being said, there are a few ancestries which might resonate thematically with certain plot points in this campaign. Flesh warps will find themselves with plenty of connections to certain plot elements around the midpoint of the story, as might Nephilim who descend from the inhabitants of Hell. Similarly, elves, and especially elves who study elvish history, will have a chance to connect to the story in a big way, assuming your GM hasn't done some retconning as a result of the remaster. Beastkin might also have a chance to shine in the first half of the story, though they might be greeted with a degree of hostility by some of Otari's residents early on. Also, characters who can connect to the theme of death or undeath, like Duskwalkers, might find themselves with an innate connection to the themes of the story. Mechanically speaking, characters with dark vision will perform better in this AP than characters without it, as the vast majority of encounters take place underground against creatures who are well suited to fighting in darkness. Other senses, like scent, life sense, or tremor sense, could be helpful in mitigating the effects of darkness, though these are difficult to come by, especially at low level. Umbral gnomes, cavern elves, orcs, goblins, and dwarves immediately come to mind when thinking about subterranean ancestries for PCs, though plenty, and I do mean plenty, of other great options exist. Again, don't be afraid to break out the weird ancestries for this campaign. They'll be just fine. If you do consider playing a kobold, however, keep in mind that Otari has faced substantial threats from kobold tribes in the surrounding wilderness throughout its history. If you choose to play a kobold, get used to the idea of facing a fair bit of discrimination, until you can earn the respect and appreciation of the townsfolk through some act of heroism. Finally, if your PC dies at some point during the story, I think this AP is a fantastic opportunity to break out the rules for undead PCs presented in the Book of the Dead, especially the Ghost archetype. Not to spoil too much, but a PC coming back as a ghost to help their comrades finish the story from beyond the grave could make for an incredibly rich character arc in the right party, and one which strongly connects to the plot of the campaign. If this idea appeals to you, talk to your GM. Since Abomination Vaults is mainly a dungeon crawl style campaign, PCs should expect to face a series of varied threats in relatively quick succession. That being said, resorting to combat isn't necessarily required in many situations. Despite the AP's deadly reputation, stealth, diplomacy, and various knowledge skills can be put to good use to avoid many encounters entirely, or at least give the PCs a significant advantage when fights do kick off. Because of this, I strongly suggest that players discuss amongst themselves how they want to tackle this adventure path and reach some sort of consensus. Does your party want to take advantage of every possible non-combat option? Or do you want to smash down doors and hit things until they don't get back up? If you want to strike a balance, maybe try to plan for what that balance will be ahead of time, and make sure each PC has skills which can contribute to both styles of play during character creation. If you want to be able to handle challenges in a variety of ways, I highly suggest the free archetype variant rule for this campaign, assuming your GM is on board. It will give you a chance to experience the best the system has to offer, tackling problems with a multitude of solutions. If you plan to take advantage of some non-combat options, then quite a few skills are incredibly important to this AP, so I want to discuss skill balance first and foremost in this section. Traps have the potential to be a serious problem for PCs, so characters who can detect them and either avoid them or destroy them will be incredibly useful. To that end, parties should consider having one player with exceptionally good perception. This is best exemplified by the rogue, investigator, or ranger, but other classes with high wisdom might fill this role easily. I should note, however, that these classes might face a specific challenge due to the monsters present in this AP, but I'll get to that near the end of this section. There should also be one member of the party competent in thievery to help deal with traps once they're spotted. Aside from perception and thievery, the party should collectively cover a broad range of knowledge skills. Religion and occultism both stand out, but arcana is useful as well. Other ways of accessing a broad range of lore skills, like bardic lore, loremaster lore, or the thaumaturge's diverse lore feat, could all serve a party well. The archaeologist archetype can contribute to this lore focus as well, and has the potential to be excellent at disarming traps. Even the additional lore feat can go a long way on characters with high intelligence, like wizards, maguses, or witches. The specific lore skills relevant to this campaign include cavern lore, Otari lore, and spirit lore, though a few other lores come up on occasion. Finally, the face skills, deception, diplomacy, and intimidation can all be extremely useful, but there's a catch. Many uses of these skills are language dependent, so knowledge of a variety of languages could come in handy. While common can get the PCs pretty far above ground, once they delve into the depths, they might find themselves more reliant upon undercommon and Aklo. Heck, even Elvish has its time to shine. To make use of the face skills, charismatic characters like thaumaturges, sorcerers, oracles, bards, or even some psychics might all be great choices. The dandy or captivator archetypes could also help PCs excel in these areas. Alright, enough about skills. What if your party wants to just throw down and conquer this dungeon with raw power? Well, first things first, the Abomination Vaults adventure path has a deadly reputation. I do not suggest violence as the solution to every problem. Even if you want to fight everything in sight, I still suggest you plan your combats carefully, and emphasize tactics and teamwork. PF2E is a system which rewards cooperation on the part of the players, and if you just rush blindly into fights, your PC will almost certainly die, sooner rather than later. Frontline combatants who can reliably tank hits and dish out punishment will do well in this campaign, and having at least one party member with strength and athletics could benefit a party greatly. To that end, the fighter, monk, and champion could all excel, as could barbarians. Melee rangers could fill this role as well, but rangers should note that the maps in this AP tend to be small, making ranged combat less viable as a strategy, at least for characters wanting to play snipers. Mitigating damage will be important if your group is willing to jump into combat at every opportunity, so the Bastion and Sentinel archetypes could do well. I should also suggest summoners as potential frontliners, and Psychopomp or Phantom Eidolons could be especially thematic for this AP. If you plan on making strikes, you should know that enemies with immunity to precision damage are fairly common in this campaign. This could seriously hamper rogues, precision edge rangers, swashbucklers, and investigators in a fair number of combat situations. Some GMs might be willing to remove this immunity from monsters to allow PCs to shine, but you shouldn't count on that, so talk to your GM before playing these classes. Similarly, a lot of enemies in this campaign have resistance or immunity to poison, and even more have high fortitude saves. Characters who rely on poisons will have a hard time as a result. There are also a substantial number of enemies who are incorporeal. Frontliners who can deal with these resistances, like champions with the Blade Ally feat or Spirit Instinct barbarians, will be invaluable in overcoming these challenges. For similar reasons, the Undead Slayer or Mindsmith archetypes could also be useful. Spellcasters in this campaign could be members of many classes while remaining effective. Clerics with a healing font and holy sanctification are a standout choice, and the ability to both heal and deal vitality damage will be excellent during this AP. Life oracles or divine sorcerers could also fill this role, albeit to a lesser extent. Thematically, casters who connect to the idea of communing with or quieting spirits, such as certain psychics, the new animist, Bones or Ancestors oracles, or characters with feats from the Hallowed Necromancer or Exorcist archetypes, or even the upcoming Rivathuni Emissary class archetype, might all play nicely upon this theme. Casters focusing on blasting or area control should recognize the presence of confined spaces in this AP. Blasters will need to coordinate with their teammates to lure enemies into straight lines for lightning bolts, but should also be aware of the danger posed by AoE effects to their allies. By contrast, area control casters might be better suited to take advantage of this more easily than their blaster counterparts. Given the potentially combat-heavy nature of this AP, I also want to touch on the importance of healing. A party who wants to rely heavily on combat should have plenty of options for in-combat healing. This could include a Cleric's Divine Font, a Champion or Blessed One with access to lay on hands, a Medic with battle medicine and risky surgery, an Herbalist with poultice preparation, or an Alchemist or Investigator who can brew elixirs of life. Religious options for PCs are nearly as open-ended as the choice of Ancestry. That said, a few options exist which stand out to me as relevant. In Otari, the most commonly worshipped deities are Cayden Cailean, Erastil, Gozrah, and Sarenrae. Of those four, Sarenrae and Cayden Cailean are the two best suited to this campaign, for their emphasis on mercy and forgiveness, and adventuring, respectively. As mentioned earlier in my discussion of Otari, the town plays host to a Serenite library, which can help followers of the goddess feel welcome in the setting. At the same time, the Crow's Cask Brewery and Tavern serves as a shrine to Cayden Cailean, meaning followers of the Lucky Drunk will feel a sense of community. Though no specific structures dedicated to Erastil exist in Otari, followers of Old Deadeye who take a more active approach in his dedication to community defense might also feel compelled to clear out the Abomination Vaults to ensure the safety of Otari. The strong theme of undeath in this campaign might call to mind the teachings of Pharasma, the Lady of Graves. her followers will likely be strongly motivated to face off against the undead threats which the vaults contain. Other deities who might play on this theme include Magrim of the Dwarven Pantheon, or any of Pharasma's Psychopomp Usher's servants. I also strongly suggest characters consider playing followers of Ashava, the lesser-known Imperial Lord of Dancing and Lost Souls. She takes a less violent approach to sending the unquiet dead to their final rest, which might allow players to specialize in fighting the undead without compelling them to go in guns blazing at all times. Additionally, Ashava's areas of concern have some overlap with themes which develop a bit later in the campaign, but I'll avoid digging into more detail here to keep out of spoiler territory. In a similar vein to Ashava, Tskio of the Tian Pantheon takes a gentle and diplomatic approach with the undead, relying on violence only as a last resort. Deities of knowledge, who encourage study and exploration on the part of their followers, would fit the dungeon delving and mystery solving elements of this story quite nicely. Nethys stands out in this regard, and priests of the all-seeing eye could very easily find themselves drawn into the mystery of what lies beneath the gauntlet. Similarly, followers of Irori or his nephew Gruhashta might find the curiosities of the Abomination Vaults intriguing. I also want to mention Alceta, Goddess of Doorways, as a potentially interesting choice. Alceta teaches her followers the importance of knowing which doors in life should remain shut and which should be opened, making many of her followers skilled explorers and lockpickers as a result. I should also mention that a prominent early-game NPC in this campaign worships the Cosmic Caravan, a collection of deities who represent the night sky. The members of the pantheon are Sarenrae, the sun, Desna, the stars, Grotus, the moon, Ashava and the black butterfly, both broadly representing the night, Pulura, representing the northern lights, Ketefis, again representing the moon, and Yog-Sothoth, representing darkness, though sometimes Skio has been known to replace Grotus. PCs who worship this pantheon will have an immediate connection with this early-game NPC, and it is definitely one of the most flavorful pantheons Paizo has developed in 2E. Alright, now I want to discuss the backgrounds presented to PCs for the Abomination Vaults adventure path. Like other APs, Abomination Vaults provides several pre-made backgrounds for PCs to connect them to the story. The 7 backgrounds for this campaign provide your characters with a connection to the themes of the story, and usually a connection to Otari and its residents. Bibliophiles are characters with a love of the written word, especially evocative works of fiction or fancy. You have developed a friendship with Morlibent, the bookseller who runs the Odd Stories bookshop in Otari. In addition to being trained in Arcana, you gain the Arcane Sense skill feat and have proficiency in library lore. Eldritch Anatomists are characters with a fascination for the twisted art of flesh warping. You might have developed a fascination with Nex and its famous flesh forges, or perhaps with Runelord Elasnist and her sin spawn and reef claws. Either way, you are a scholar on such matters, and hope to study them further. In addition to being trained in medicine and gaining the assurance feat in that same skill, you gain proficiency in flesh warp lore. Fogfen Tale-Tellers are characters who've developed a tendency to pass around stories of the horrors within the Fogfen, the swamp just north of Otari. You've witnessed the strange monstrosities in the Fogfen firsthand, but so far no one has believed your tales of warning. In addition to being trained in athletics and gaining the Titan Wrestler skill feat, you gain proficiency in swamp lore. Market runners are characters who earn a living running errands in the Otari market, most often for a man named Kileno Lathanar. Kileno is known for his bitter disposition, and spends much of his time reminiscing about his wife Ayla, who was killed by a werewolf 30 years ago. You've become so familiar with Kileno and the other shopkeepers in town that, in addition to becoming trained in diplomacy and gaining the Hobnobber skill feat, you gain proficiency in Otari lore. Ruin Delvers have a love of exploring ruins and abandoned sites. You might be drawn to the history inherent to such sites, or might simply see them as a rich hunting ground for lost treasures. Either way, the The Gauntlight, the strange lighthouse in the Fogfen, has always been just outside of your comfort level. You'll get there one day, though, and you've already begun your studies in preparation. You are trained in acrobatics and gain the Catfall skill feat, and also gain proficiency in Roseguard lore. Star Watchers are close friends with Rin Sivinxi, the star-obsessed paranoid shopkeep who manages Rin's wonders in Otari. Rin's love of stargazing has rubbed off on you, and you've picked up on some of her expertise as a result. You consider Rin a close friend, and though you recognize her tendency for paranoia, you will always listen to her concerns. In addition to being trained in occultism and gaining the dubious knowledge skill feat, you gain proficiency in astrology lore. Finally, the Witchlight followers are characters who've experienced the call of the Will-O-Wisp, the strange floating lights which are so often found in or around swamps. These lights called to you once on your travels in the past, but you managed to resist their call, possibly by pure luck, or maybe with the intercession of some benevolent force. You are trained in survival and gain proficiency in the Wisp lore skill. You also gain the terrain expertise skill feat in both swamps and underground bodies of water. Well, if you still want to play the Abomination Vaults adventure path, that should be enough information to get you started. I strongly encourage you to read the player's guide which Paizo has put together. Again, it's totally free and I've linked it below. This AP is consistently cited as one of the best ways to introduce new players to Pathfinder 2e, and I can certainly see why. If your table enjoys a good dungeon crawl, it's hard to do better than this campaign, at least at low to medium level. Next week, I'll be diving back into deity lore with my first deep dive into one of the outer gods, Nimbaloth, the Empty Death, and the mother of the Will-O-Wisps. And there's certainly no spoilery connection between her and Abomination Vaults. Definitely not. See you next time.